The small village of San Miguel rested in the shadow of ancient mountains, where mist clung to the valleys like ghostly fingers. Maria Hernandez had grown up hearing the warnings passed down through generations about the river that cut through their land. The elders spoke in hushed tones about La Llorona, the weeping woman who haunted the waters at night. As a child, Maria had dismissed these tales as nothing more than stories meant to keep children from wandering too close to the dangerous currents. The summer heat pressed down on the village like a heavy blanket, making the air thick and difficult to breathe. Maria wiped the sweat from her brow as she hung laundry in the yard of her grandmother's house. The old adobe walls had stood for over a century, witnessing countless stories and secrets. Her grandmother, Doña Elena, sat in her rocking chair on the porch, her weathered hands working methodically as she wove a small charm of red thread. "Abuela, why do you still make those?" Maria asked, gesturing toward the charm. The old woman's eyes, clouded with cataracts, but still sharp with wisdom, flickered up to meet her granddaughter's gaze. "Protection," she replied simply, her voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind. "The full moon comes tonight, and the veil between worlds grows thin." Maria smiled indulgently at her grandmother's superstitions. At 25, she considered herself modern, educated, no longer bound by the old ways and beliefs that governed her grandmother's life. As twilight descended upon the village, painting the sky in hues of purple and orange, Maria felt a strange unease settle over her. The wind had shifted, carrying with it the scent of water and something else, something ancient and sorrowful. From somewhere in the distance came the sound of a woman weeping, so faint that Maria thought she might have imagined it. She glanced at her grandmother, who had gone very still, her fingers frozen mid-weave. "Did you hear that?" Maria whispered, but the old woman only pressed the charm into her palm and closed Maria's fingers around it. "Do not go near the river tonight," she warned, her voice suddenly urgent. "No matter what you hear, no matter who calls your name." The moon rose, high and full above San Miguel, casting silver light across the sleeping village. Maria tossed and turned in her bed, unable to find rest. The weeping had grown louder, more insistent, seeming to call to her specifically. She pressed her pillow over her ears, but the sound penetrated even that barrier. Against her better judgment, Maria rose from her bed and moved to the window. The charm her grandmother had given her lay forgotten on the nightstand, its red threads glowing faintly in the moonlight. Outside, the world had transformed into a landscape of shadows and silver. The path to the river seemed to shimmer with an unearthly light, beckoning Maria forward. "Just a quick look," she whispered to herself, slipping a shawl over her nightgown. "Then I'll know there's nothing to fear." The wooden floorboards creaked beneath her feet as she crept through the darkened house. Her grandmother's soft snores drifted from the bedroom down the hall, reassuring in their normalcy. Maria hesitated at the front door, her hand hovering over the latch. The weeping had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that felt somehow worse. The night air caressed Maria's skin as she stepped onto the path leading away from the village. Crickets fell silent as she passed, and even the night birds seemed to hold their breath. The river lay just beyond the bend in the road, its waters reflecting the perfect circle of the moon. As Maria approached, she saw a figure standing at the water's edge, a woman in a flowing white dress that rippled like water itself. The woman's back was turned, her long black hair hanging in wet ropes down to her waist. "Hello," Maria called, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you all right?" The figure turned slowly, revealing a face of terrible beauty, skin pale as death stretched over high cheekbones, and eyes black as the deepest part of the river stared back at Maria. "Have you seen my children?" the woman asked, her voice like water rushing over stones. "I have lost my children." Maria took an involuntary step backward, her grandmother's warnings echoing in her mind. The woman took a step forward, water dripping from her dress and pooling at her feet. "Please," she said, extending a hand toward Maria. "Help me find them." Maria turned to run, but her feet seemed rooted to the spot, unable to move as the spectral woman drew closer. "Your name," the ghostly woman whispered, now only an arm's length away. "Tell me your name." Maria felt the words rising unbidden to her lips, fighting desperately to keep them contained. Her grandmother had taught her long ago that names hold power, and to give yours to a spirit meant surrendering that power entirely. The woman's cold fingers brushed against Maria's cheek, leaving trails of icy water that burned like fire. "I can see them in your eyes," La Llorona murmured. "My children live within you." A distant voice called Maria's name, breaking the spell that held her frozen. She recognized her grandmother's voice, thin but determined, cutting through the night air like a blade. La Llorona hissed, drawing back as if burned. Maria found her feet could move again, and she stumbled backward, away from the river's edge. The weeping woman's face contorted with rage, her mouth opening impossibly wide to reveal teeth sharp as razors. "You cannot escape me," she snarled, her voice no longer beautiful, but harsh and grating. "The river claims what belongs to it." Maria ran, her heart pounding in her chest like a trapped bird. Behind her, she could hear the splash of water as La Llorona pursued, each step bringing the ghostly woman closer. The path back to the village seemed longer now, stretching endlessly before her as she fled. Branches scratched at her face and arms, drawing thin lines of blood that gleamed black in the moonlight. Ahead, Maria could see the flickering light of a candle, her grandmother standing at the edge of the property, with her arms outstretched, lips moving in a prayer older than the village itself. "Abuela," Maria cried, reaching desperately for her grandmother's hand. Just as their fingers touched, Maria felt cold hands grasp her ankles, pulling her backward with inhuman strength. She fell hard, the breath knocked from her lungs as she hit the ground. The old woman moved with surprising speed, throwing a handful of salt mixed with dried herbs in a circle around them both. La Llorona shrieked, a sound that pierced the night like a physical thing, causing the windows of nearby houses to rattle in their frames. "You have no claim on her," Doña Elena declared, her voice steady and strong despite her age. "Return to your waters, spirit, and trouble my family no more." Dawn broke over San Miguel, pale light creeping across the landscape and chasing away the shadows of night. Maria sat at her grandmother's kitchen table, a cup of strong tea warming her hands that still trembled slightly. The events of the night felt dreamlike now, fading at the edges like an old photograph. But the scratches on her arms and the mud caked beneath her fingernails told a different story. Why did she come for me? Maria asked, her voice hoarse from screaming. Doña Elena sighed, settling into the chair across from her granddaughter. The river has always hungered for the young, the old woman explained, stirring honey into her own tea. La Llorona is its voice, its reach into our world. She was once a woman, like any other, who drowned her children in madness and grief. Now she wanders, seeking to replace what she has lost. Maria shuddered, remembering the cold touch of the spirit's fingers on her face. But why me specifically? She pressed. Doña Elena's eyes, roomy with age, but still sharp with knowledge, fixed on Maria's face. Because you carry new life within you, she said simply. A child whose existence you do not yet know. Maria's hand flew instinctively to her stomach, flat and unchanged. She and her husband had been trying for a baby for over a year, with no success. Could it be possible? The spirits always know first, her grandmother continued, reaching across the table to clasp Maria's free hand. La Llorona sensed the new soul and sought to claim it before it could draw breath in this world. Tears spilled down Maria's cheeks, a complex mixture of fear and joy washing through her. The charm I gave you would have protected you had you kept it close, Doña Elena chided gently. But now you understand why our traditions matter, why the old ways persist. As the village awakened around them, life continuing as it always had, Maria knew she would never again dismiss her grandmother's warnings as mere superstition. The world held mysteries deeper and darker than she had ever imagined, spirits that moved in the shadows between one reality and the next. That night, when her husband returned from his work in the city, Maria told him everything about La Llorona, about the baby growing within her, about the thin veil that separated their world from the next. Together, they hung Doña Elena's red thread charms in every window and doorway of their home. And though Maria never again ventured near the river after dark, on quiet nights when the moon was full, she sometimes heard the distant sound of weeping carried on the wind, a mother eternally searching for what she had lost, a warning to those who might forget the power of the old stories that were never just stories at all.